Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a book review from the Goosebumps House of Shivers series. And it's book number 4, Say My Name, Say My Name. Now I know at the time of me making this video review of this book, the book's actually not officially released yet. And it's been a reoccurring thing for some time now where I go to my local bookstores and I get these books ahead of time for some reason, because I guess the workers at these bookstores don't really care about release date. So I heard that people were kind of finding these out and about sporadically. And I went to my bookstore thinking that they probably would have them there as well. And sure enough, they had one copy on the shelf. So I went ahead and picked this up and I decided to read it kind of ahead of the curve so I can have my own opinion and not be formulated around other people's, I guess. And I have to say, after reading this book, I hated this thing. This book sucked from start to finish. I never wanted to be done with a Goosebumps book as badly as I wanted this book to be over, if I'm being honest. And that's saying a lot. This has to be one of the worst Goosebumps books I've ever read. And we'll get into the reasons why near the back half of the video. But I'm going to say this up front. Because this is a new Goosebumps book, a lot of you probably haven't read it yet. And I wouldn't blame you if you just listened to this portion of the video and clicked off and then came back after you read it. I totally condone that because my reviews work better if you've read the book beforehand and then you come to hear my thoughts. So for that, I strongly urge all of you out there, especially the ones that see this video and don't have a copy in hand to read, to do that. Because we have a lot to unpack with this. And I can totally see this book might be a really divisive one in the fandom, especially if you love the silly, out there, crazy Goosebumps stories. This might itch a scratch for you. This does have some unique qualities to it that I think some people will appreciate. But other than that, I think that the real dividing point is going to be with execution on this. And I can't wait to see other people's thoughts on this as time goes on. But with that out the way, I'm now going to get into the plot overview. And this portion of the video will have some spoilers. So, like I said, if you haven't read it, I will put a timestamp in the description and the comment section of the section of the review here to avoid spoilers. So, let's get into it. So the story starts off with the main character named Cody Brockman, and he and his best friend Sam are about to go on an adventure going out into the creek in the nearby woods where they live. And Cody, he's very outdoorsy, and you learn this early on in the story as he's telling the reader that his best friend Sam is like a AI savant, and he designs video games, and he's very talented for his age. And he's going to be so wrapped up in doing this stuff at one point where he's not going to want to hang out with Cody anymore and go into the woods and do these adventures. So Cody manages to convince him one last time, I guess, to go out and go to the creek and have an adventure. However, there is a portion of the creek, as we learn early on in the story, that the kids are supposed to avoid. And I think it's called the Deep Well portion, or whatever it's called, as you'll read in the book. And don't worry, it bears no real significance of the story. But the kids kind of, put it in the back of their mind that this place could be, spooky, or something very horrendous could be there in this portion of the woods, and they are going to try to avoid that. Well, after we get to see some interaction with Cody and his dad, and how he, talks to him and essentially bees a smart aleck to him before they head out. Cody gets the rundown from Sam that Sam has been designing this game, and as we learn in the story, the game is called Say My Name, Say My Name. And we learn bits and pieces, I guess, about what's really going on in the game beforehand. But anyway, some weird phenomenon starts when Cody and Sam are out in the woods one day on this one last hurrah adventure, I guess. And they're out in the creek, I guess fishing. And they come across this, weird snake where the snake shouldn't be. And then they go to this section of the woods where there's geese in this nearby spring where the geese shouldn't be. And the geese are acting very strange. And this leads them to find this big fish like you see on the cover here. And Cody swears that when they see this fish, it says out loud to him, "Say my name, say my name." So Cody starts thinking about what just happened, and from this point on, the story kind of derails, but you kind of have to follow it a little bit. So we cut back a week prior to this event that's happening to get some context about what Cody's thinking in the moment. He seems to think that his friend Sam is throwing his voice like a ventriloquist, and the reason why we're going back a week is to go over at school where Cody and Sam and his fellow classmates are learning from this ventriloquist how to throw their voice. And there's this whole ordeal where Cody is called to the front of the class, or I guess the auditorium or whatever, to play with the dummy and attempt to throw his voice. And once we get caught up to speed on that, we cut back to present day again. And Cody's like, "Well, I think that it's you or that's saying, say my name, to mess with me." And Sam's like, "Come on, man, I didn't do that." And Cody's like, "Well, I didn't do it." And then the two boys realize that, something is very wrong here because this stuff shouldn't be happening. Well, to make matters worse, Cody's dog has come along with them, and he's starting to act strange himself and starts running away, right, and disappearing. And Cody and Sam have to figure out how to find the dog. Well, they come across this hog creature that's like giant and woolly that chases them around the woods, and they get thrusted into this part of the stream where they're not supposed to be, and they're getting close to this portion of nearby deep well or wherever it's called. And once they get around there, they get turned around and lost, and they're looking for Cody's dog, and they perhaps find him again, but the dog is hot on the trail trying to head back, I guess, to Cody's house, where the two boys are trying to as well to get back to. But before they do, they end up running into these two girls named Darby and Marissa, and they just so happen to be making a a wooden cabin out in the middle of the woods, and they see the dog possibly go inside the cabin. So the boys try to go in there to investigate. They don't see the dog anywhere, and the girls don't help. They try to help, but they don't see the dog as well. So they say, "Why don't you go ahead and try to go back home, and we'll look for the dog for you while you're gone." So the boys are like, "All right, well, we're kind of losing, time to get back home, so that's fine. If you find the dog, just text me and let me know, whatever." So the boys, they make their way back to Cody's house, but when they end up there, they realize that there's this old woman living there, and she's like, "I live here. I don't know who you are, but I've lived here way longer than you boys have been alive." And Cody and Sam are adamant that they live at this house, or Cody lives at this house, so they stick to their ground. And then the old lady's like, "Well, my son lives 2 doors down, and he's a cage fighter. He's going to come fight you guys if you don't leave." And sure enough, the boys are cornered by this cage fighter, and a little bit of chaos ensues. And Cody and Sam are kind of left wondering what's going to come next in the story. But before we get to find out what happens to them, we randomly cut into the fourth act, which puts us into the point of view of Darby. And Darby and Marissa are explained to be going back to them building this wooden hut in the forest. They're doing so for extra credit, and they both realize that they don't need to do it because they have straight A's already, and they're already on the honor roll. So we kind of get their perspective of what's going on in the story a little bit. once they interact with Sam and Cody and Cody's dog, and they end up bumping into this hog creature. And after interacting with it, they look at their hands and it turns to hooves. Before we find out what happens to them further on, we cut back to Cody again, and Cody ends up back at Sam's house, and Sam is talking about his older brother and how he's not home yet, but they're going to go look at the game and possibly see if there's any connections there. Now, from this point, I'm going to be very vague and also very surface level, because it's very easy to spoil the direction of where this story is going. But at this point of the book, and I think we're probably at like page 70 or 80 by this point, we start getting answers as to the phenomenon, at least from Sam's perspective, about what's really going on with this game that he's been making and what exactly this game is, which is called Say My Name, Say My Name. And we learn some backstory about how he's tried to program people that he knows or he finds pictures of on the internet into the game, and he's poured countless hours into it. And Cody comes to this realization that maybe this game needs to be destroyed because perhaps the reality that they live in is being affected by this new game that Sam has created. But as the story goes along, the boys are trying to figure out what's exactly causing this phenomenon to happen. And I'll leave it up to you guys to find out what those answers are, if there are any, if of what the actual cause is. But let's just say Cody ends up in like a Groundhog Day situation where he wakes up one morning and things are kind of back to normal, but it's still changed because of the game. And there's some things dealing with like Sam's older brother, as we learn, that perhaps lends credence to people that are programming the game can affect reality to them. And then, you get to that point, I guess, of the climax of the book where, Sam and Cody kind of realize what exactly entails this phenomenon and perhaps what exactly is their reality and their existence to begin with. And once they come to this conclusion, they find this mechanism that they think could help reverse things that have happened in the game to get them back to their reality, let's just say. And without going into any too depth of specifics there, maybe they hit a certain brick wall with that and there's a reset, which leads to the ending of the book, which implies that all of this phenomenon perhaps is an endless cycle for Cody and Sam. And that, in a nutshell, is what you're going to expect out of this book. Say my name, say my name. So I'm going to say this off the bat. I guess I'll go ahead and start off with negatives because I don't have much positives, and I guess I can leave off on the positives this time around. This book is a mess. It is a total mess from start to finish. The pacing on this thing is atrocious. There's no characterization with any of these characters. You don't feel anything about them. They're all written super surface level. And I guess Stein was going for a more action-focused book to kind of help, stride along this idea he had, which, if you're trying to get a general gauge of what this book is, it's like if you took Legend of the Lost Legend, Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid, and the Halloween game from the Goosebumps Haunted Library, and you put them into a blender. But in all the wrong ways possible. I have never read such a scatterbrained, all over the place Goosebumps book. And it seems like there's certain direction choices here that I want to appreciate. Like, we have POV changes in this book with Darby, which I thought was refreshing. But it's so brief, and it really doesn't add too much to the story, all said and done. And I'm going to be honest here, leaning into that a little bit. The stuff we get in this book, in terms of like payoff and setup, from the get-go, you already know the direction they're going to go with in the story. If you've read any Goosebumps book with a similar twang to this, you can predict the Deus Ex Machina a mile away on this, which isn't fun. But the moments, I guess, or the parts of levity that Stein tries to bring to the book with the humor, they register as wet farts. Like, there's a reminiscent taste of Most Wanted in this book. Like, this book came across like this should have come out in that series, where it's poorly constructed. The jokes are about burping, and it's very juvenile with what even happens to Darby and Marissa with their hands turning into hooves and stuff like that. It's all cringe. It's all cringe-inducing stuff. Nothing is funny here. And maybe it would be better if we felt more about these characters, given aside maybe the more interesting part of the book, which is the concept itself. But the characters don't offer much here either, so you don't really feel much emotional weight. There's no real monologue going on with the book, because the book spends way too much focus in just barreling through random event after random event to kind of throw the reader off from the predictableness. But like I said, if you catch that stuff early on, you already know the direction they're going to come back to by the end of the book. So yeah, this book is just a big old cluster mess of scatterbrainness and randomness. And it's not good. The humor's not good. The characters are not good. It's just baffling. It's bafflingly bad. Like, I can't believe R.L. Stein wrote this book. It makes me think that maybe, just maybe, he actually did write Legend of the Lost Legend. I don't know what he was smoking with this one. I know he was kind of excited about it on X and Twitter, but holy crap, man. This book was just not well written whatsoever. The writing here doesn't even feel like, passable R.L. Stein to me. Like, R.L. Stein usually is a great Proust writer, and you get a glimpse of that in here, but there's not a lot of it. I mean, you don't feel the impact of all the great Goosebumps books before this one in this book. This just feels juvenile. It feels filler in nature. And, to make it even worse than it actually is for me here is the ending. The ending is rough. It's one of those, I just wasted my time reading this kind of endings, and I hate it deeply. And that just is the cherry on the turd sundae for this book, I guess. I'm just going to be upfront and very brief. I hated pretty much everything about this book. Minus like two things. And these are my two golden positives about this book. And that's all I have. One is the concept. I think that this concept is very fresh for Goosebumps, at least in terms of these mainline books. I like the idea of making a video game in AI as the template and the concept for the story. You wouldn't think that's the direction, but I think that's a cool concept. And maybe an alternate reality where Stein had a completely different direction and idea to go with it, this would have been a fun concept to see. And I really did enjoy that part to the story. Which leads into the second big positive I have with it, and I didn't get into too much detail with it in the plot overview, but there's some solid moments when we start getting the answers involving these two characters, Cody and Sam, as they're coming together in their realizations and what have you. There's some harrowing moments that Cody goes through, I will say. There's one scene in particular involving a swarm of insects that was pretty gross, and I'll give Stein that. That was probably the best scene in the whole book. So yeah, there's some decent horror to be had here from time to time when Stein stops the manicness and the random pandemonium to deliver that to the reader. But going back to negatives here, and I should mention this book, okay, I have seen Goosebumps do some experimental stuff in the past. This feels very much in nature. I've already mentioned it feels like it should have been in Most Wanted, but it has this Series 2000-esque thing going about it. And what I mean by that is it's trying to experiment with how the story is laid out. I've never seen Stein do a story like this besides like Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. But he had the gall near the back half of the book. And I kid you not, this might be a major spoiler, it might not be, but there's really nothing to say here. There's two chapters, and when I say two chapters, there's two blank pages that are called chapters, like chapter 42 or 43. And it says, and I quote, and I'm not making this up, the only text on the page, on both pages, is error 404. He made 2 chapters in this book blank pages to insinuate the setup to the twist ending. I was baffled when I saw that. And I was like, Stein really tried to pull this off again? The whole be afraid, be very afraid, you choose the ending crap? But this is way worse. It's way worse than that. And I know a lot of people historically have beaten up Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. Go read this book and go read that one. That one is way less worse in comparison to this, in my opinion. So take that for what you will. But yeah, I hated that too. And, you know, I can go into more specifics here and just really lay into this book. But honestly, I don't feel like droning this review out any longer. I just want to get this one over with. I hated this book deeply. I hated it, hated it, hated it. If I had to rate this thing from a 0 to 5 star basis, y'all, aside from the concept and some good horror scenes, like I said, with the insect swarm, those did kind of save it here a little bit, but they're not meaningful enough. Maybe if the characters were better written, maybe if the plot was less sporadic and random and all over the place, go gadget, random bullcrap, and it was more focused, this might be, you know, a D- or higher. Who knows where it could have landed if Stein wasn't trying to be all over the place with this one. But given what we were given here, I'm going to give this thing an F. This book sucks. This might be the second worst modern that I've read. I mean, this is right there next to Dr. Maniac, We'll See You Now. It's not as infuriatingly horrible as that book could be at times. And honestly, I think that book has way higher high points than this book ever did. But this book is just vapid to the core. And honestly, give it some time. I honestly could see myself saying that this is the worst modern that I've read. But with that out of the way, yeah, this is getting an F. With all those problems I have for me just outright hating pretty much everything about this book, I went ahead and I deducted off the top of 5, 3.5 off. And I gave this book a 1.5 out of 5 stars. With the kids' horror 1-point curve to it included. This is a flat F. I mean, it's not quite to that Deadly Experiments of Dr. Eek level, but it was close. It was pushing it. It was pushing my patience a lot. This very well could be in my top 10 worst Goosebumps books of all time video whenever I get to that point after I read all the Goosebumps books in the series. Or maybe top 10 worst things I've ever seen come out of Goosebumps. This probably will be on there. This book is a dud. It's a stinker. And I know there's probably going to be all over the place opinions about this. But this is just my opinion. So take that with a grain of salt at the end of the day. And of course, after you read the book, come back to this video and comment on the comment section your thoughts on the book. Because I'm curious to see what people think about these newer Goosebumps House of Shivers books. I know a lot of people are probably excited to get their hands on a new Goosebumps book. And I don't mean to be the Debbie Downer at the end of the day and tell everybody, you know, this isn't worth the pickup. No, you should go pick this book up and give it a try. You might like it more, or way more in this case, than I did. But that's the beauty about Goosebumps. It's kind of like an ice cream buffet. You can like Rocky Road but hate pistachio ice cream. But somebody can like pistachio ice cream and hate Rocky Road. That's what Goosebumps is, and that's the beauty about kids' horror anthology series at the end of the day. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on this book. Say my name, say my name. Let me know down in the comment section when you're finally able to read the book. What's your thoughts? Did you love it? Did you hate it? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.